My stepsister ran off with my fiancé a week before the wedding, after sending me postcards for months. But karma has a funny way of working things out. I was 28 years old and engaged to my college boyfriend. We'd been together since we were 18, all through university, and got engaged when I was 23. We had been engaged for a year, and everything seemed perfect until a week before our wedding. That's when my fiancé, Greg, and my stepsister, Melissa, ran off together. They left only a letter for me. In the letter, Greg explained that he had started an affair with Melissa a couple of months after we got engaged. He said he realized he couldn't marry me because it would be unfair to both of us, and to Melissa, since they were the ones truly in love. He believed the universe had used me to guide him to his real love, and he couldn't deceive everyone any longer with the illusion of a happy future. That was it. They left, and I didn't see them again until recently. Greg's parents covered the entire wedding cost and didn't want me to pay a dime. They were embarrassed by what their son had done. After that, I had no contact with them, and we didn't have anything else to talk about. But my own family was furious. My father was so upset that he considered hiring a private investigator to track them down and bring them back to get answers. For context, my dad isn't my biological father, but I've always treated him as my real dad since he's been in my life since I was very young. My biological father left shortly after I was born, and my mom never saw him again. They had never been married. My mom remarried when I was 8, to my dad, who has always been there for me. Melissa and I used to attend the same school, which is how our parents met. But for some reason, Melissa decided she didn't like me and began bullying me for years. She was a true tormentor, and her friends joined in on making my life miserable. It wasn't just at school. She even kept it up when we were at home, always looking for ways to make me feel bad. I complained to my parents several times and they tried to intervene, but it was never enough. She didn't fear any punishment, not even from our parents. My school years were a nightmare because of her. At that time, my mom wasn't around much, and Melissa's mother had passed away when Melissa was young, so she didn't have much parental guidance. Whenever my mom tried to discipline her, Melissa would tell her that she wasn't her real mother and had no right to scold her. My dad tried his best to stop her bullying, but nothing worked. They tried everything from scolding to speaking kindly to her, but she refused to stop. Sometimes they even threatened to send her away, but she would dare them to do it, knowing their threats were empty. By high school, things only got worse. Melissa had adopted a lot of bad habits and was practically a delinquent. She started smoking, skipping school, and drinking with her equally troublesome friends. It wasn't until she was arrested one night, along with her friends, for breaking into someone's house while drunk, that our parents finally decided to send her away and get her the help she clearly needed. After weeks of protests and begging, my parents succeeded in getting her into a rehabilitation center for troubled teens. She wasn't happy about it, but my dad was firm, telling her that if she wanted to live with us and be part of the family, she would have to change. He couldn't allow her behavior to continue, especially when she was becoming a danger to society. She was angry and left for several years, not returning until after we had graduated. During that time, she lived with her aunt and attended a school near the rehab center. I didn't see her during those years, as I wasn't interested in how my biggest bully was doing. My parents visited her every weekend, asking me if I wanted to join them, but I always said no. Once she was gone, my high school years got so much better since I no longer had someone bullying me. Melissa continued her education at the rehab center and later came back. The first thing she did was apologize for everything she had put me through. She seemed a little calmer, and I actually thought she had changed for the better. So I forgave her. We were about to leave for college in a few months anyway, so it didn't matter. Once we started college, I moved away and so did she. We only came back for holidays, and she was much kinder to me after that. By kinder, I don't mean she actually treated me well, but rather that she ignored me instead of bothering me every chance she got, like she used to. Honestly, it was a welcome change because I preferred being ignored than being bullied. Our parents noticed the shift but didn't try to force us to get along or act like sisters. Given our history, that was more than enough for them. Then I started dating Greg, and after we had been together for a year, I decided to bring him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. Everyone got along really well, and for the first time, I noticed that even Melissa seemed interested in the conversation. This was a rare occurrence since she came back from rehab. She and Greg really hit it off, and after I started dating him, she began showing more interest in being my friend. She would often come up to me just to chat, which she'd never done before. I didn't understand what was going on, and I had a small suspicion that maybe she liked Greg. So one day, I decided to ask her directly if the real reason she was trying to be my friend was because of Greg or something like that, because I was paranoid. She laughed and told me that wasn't the case. But Greg had mentioned how good his relationship was with his siblings during our first dinner together, while talking about his family. That had made her reconsider how she had been treating me since coming back. And now she was trying to make things right and improve our relationship. It had nothing to do directly with Greg, but he had definitely played a role as a catalyst that made her reflect on our relationship. She told me she had blamed me for her being sent away for so long, but eventually, she accepted that it wasn't my fault. She had brought it upon herself with her terrible behavior. So, it was time to stop punishing me for it and start trying to truly be part of the family. She said this wouldn't be possible until she apologized sincerely and actively worked on our relationship. I'm an emotional fool, and what she told me that day moved me. So, like an idiot, I decided to forgive her and be friends with her. I guess that's what hurt the most because she betrayed me. After we became friends, things went well for a while, and she was actively involved in the wedding preparations. I wouldn't say we were best friends, but we were no longer as bad as we used to be. We worked on rebuilding our relationship, meeting at least once or twice a month, and talking to each other. By the time I got engaged, we were in a good place. Whenever we saw each other at family events, things went pretty normally, so I never suspected anything. Even after the engagement, they continued acting like nothing was wrong. Not for a second did I think that maybe Greg had something with Melissa. It just never crossed my mind because Greg put on a very convincing act of being in love with me the whole time, while secretly deceiving me with Melissa. And she, too, was very convincing at pretending to be my friend. So, I didn't discover the truth until it was too late, and they were already gone. My parents wanted to track them down and bring them back to face the consequences, but I convinced them to let it go because I just wanted to forget everything. It was already enough that both of them had turned me into a complete fool and left a week before I was supposed to get married. I didn't want more drama. I was really depressed, and I simply didn't have the energy. I spent the following week doing nothing but working and sleeping, trying to avoid facing my feelings. My heart was obviously broken, and I was numb, but the worst was yet to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, I received a postcard from Melissa, sent from California. But that wasn't all. She had included a bunch of photos of her with Greg, and they looked really happy together. It was so obvious that she was rubbing it in my face because she even mentioned apologizing for the surprise before my wedding. But of course, she didn't feel sorry at all. It was just meant to make me angry. That's when I realized she had never truly forgiven me for what happened all those years ago, and she still blamed me for getting her sent away. She had never really wanted to be my friend. She had just used me to get to Greg. I trusted her and let her use me. It was a really twisted plan, I have to admit. For days after receiving that postcard, I couldn't even sleep. I was losing my mind over it. It was such a traumatic experience for me, and I had to go to therapy for months to undo all the damage and deal with my trust issues. The postcard wasn't even an isolated incident. She kept sending postcards of her and Greg for months after that, but it ended after about a year because I didn't respond or engage in the drama. Our parents were really upset about it, and naturally, they cut all ties with her after that. They didn't even try to contact her after the first postcard, and that became a huge problem for Melissa. She had been ready to inherit her father's business. She was a business student, and that was part of the reason she chose that path for herself, because she wanted to work with her father. However, after everything that happened, our father severed all ties with her and told me I could join him instead, because he felt he needed to make it up to me. But I didn't have a business degree. I was a history student, which didn't really align with business. So I had to learn the basics first. My father said it wasn't a problem because he was willing to teach me everything he knew so that I could eventually take over the business instead of Melissa. I agreed and started working under his guidance, learning how to run the business so he could retire and hand me the reins. After a while, I worked really hard, and last year I was finally promoted. My father retired, and it was an incredible feeling because I had started from scratch and had to learn everything. But now everything was running smoothly under my leadership. It had been going well for some time, and thanks to me, my parents could now spend more time together without worrying about the business because I took care of it. It's been this way for quite some time, and I practically stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father because that took up all my time, along with the therapy that helped me move on. I would say that now I've completely overcome the past and no longer think about them or what they did. I never thought they would reach out to me again, much less ask for my help, because that would take a lot of nerve and a complete lack of functioning brain cells. Asking me for help after everything they did, after they deceived me and made a fool of me, was beyond me. They truly lacked common sense for even contacting me. A few days ago, I was at home since it was the weekend, and around lunchtime, I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I thought it was the pizza I had ordered, so I didn't pay much attention. But when I opened the door, I got the biggest surprise of my life. Instead of a delivery person, it was Melissa standing outside my house, looking really worried. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited in silence for her to speak. As I looked at her, I realized she was definitely here to ask for help because she looked terrible. Her appearance gave it all away. Even as a child, Melissa had always dressed well. But now, she was wearing old, faded clothes that clearly hadn't been bought recently. Her jeans were too short, and she looked like she hadn't been eating. I had already made up my mind that whatever she was about to ask, the answer would be no. She said she needed my help because she and Greg had been fighting for a while since he lost his job a couple of months ago. Instead of looking for a new job, he had started drinking, and although she had been trying to find work for herself, she couldn't because she had given up her career to stay at home and do all the housework when she first moved in with Greg. Because of this, she hadn't been working lately, and the gap in her resume made her a poor candidate for the jobs she'd been applying for. She said she'd heard from some relatives that our father had retired and handed me control of the business, so now she was here to ask me if I would be willing to hire Greg and give him something to do. Melissa told me she had come all the way here just to ask for my help, and she apologized for what she had done in the past. She said she was counting on me to get her out of this mess. She admitted she hadn't even approached our parents yet, and had come directly to my house to ask for help, because she knew I had a kind heart. She felt terribly guilty for betraying me in the past, but she was sure I wouldn't refuse her now that she needed me. Her sense of entitlement was so ridiculous that I ended up laughing in her face and told her to look elsewhere because I don't hire cheaters. I then slammed the door in her face and went back into the living room, ready to call the police if she didn't leave my property soon. Fortunately, she left that day, but she hasn't left me alone since. After her visit, the first thing I did was call our parents and tell them what had happened. They told me they'd heard from a couple of neighbors that Melissa had returned to the city with Greg, but they hadn't believed it. We live in a relatively small town, so everyone knows everyone. We quickly discovered that Melissa had been here for about a week before she finally came to visit me. She had been living with one of her high school friends, probably the friend who told her where I lived and also about the fact that I had inherited the business which rightfully should have been hers. Now, she was really trying to take advantage of that. A couple of days after her visit, she decided to go see our parents to tell them how ruthless I was being. She had hoped they would be on her side, now that she had the upper hand in terms of who was suffering more, but she couldn't have been more wrong. My father told her that the business was mine to run now, and that she no longer had a say in the matter because he wouldn't be overseeing me. My mother reminded her that she was the one who had betrayed me by running off with my fiancé after pretending to be my friend for years, and that she completely deserved what was happening to her now. She had lost the right to ask any of us for help, especially me, after tormenting me with those postcards. Melissa tried to defend herself, saying that all that was in the past and that she was a different person now. But my parents told her to leave because they didn't want anything to do with her. This led to her throwing a tantrum at their house, claiming they had always favored me over her and treated me like the golden child. She told my father that, despite being his own flesh and blood, he had never treated her the way he treated me, and acted as if I were his daughter while she was worth nothing to him. When he reminded her that he had made more concessions for her behavior in the past than any other parent in the world would have, she said it didn't matter. I had everything that was supposed to be hers, including the business I was boasting about. She even claimed that it wasn't her fault that Greg had fallen in love with her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of with me. But for some reason, she was the one being punished for it. She insisted that the postcards she sent were a genuine apology and that she wasn't trying to torment me. Honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this since my father told me what she said. In a way, it's true that she was supposed to inherit the business and be in my place, but she really lost it due to her own actions. I had nothing to do with that. I never told my father to exclude her from his life and give the business to me. He did it on his own, and it feels somewhat unfair that she's blaming me for it. Also, what she said about me being the golden child is absolutely false, but I can understand why she would feel that way. In her mind, she was the one sent away, and for a father to decide to send their child away is a big deal. I know it was hard for my father, but again, it's neither his fault nor mine. If he hadn't taken the necessary steps, Melissa could have ended up a criminal or something because that was the path she was heading down. On top of that, I really don't think she was trying to apologize with those postcards. She was probably just trying to cover up her actions by calling it a genuine apology. I do feel bad for her because her husband turned out to be completely useless, although I dodged a bullet there. In fact, he came to me, and I can't imagine how hard that must have been for her. So, in a way, I feel sorry for how I treated her. Now, I have everything, and she has nothing, so I can't help but feel pity for her. That's just who I am as a person. Besides, so much time has passed, and I don't feel like I should hold on to that grudge anymore. But at the same time, I don't want to help her in any way. The most I can do is offer my sympathy, but I really don't want to hire her or help with money. I think it's enough that I even feel bad for her after everything she put me through. Most people probably wouldn't even blink an eye. The only reason I feel sorry for her right now is because this business really should have been hers, and now that I'm in a position of power, I feel like I'm finally getting my revenge on her. But at the same time, it doesn't feel right. Maybe it's because of what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe it's just imposter syndrome, but I feel weird about this. Am I the idiot for refusing to hire my ex-fiancé, who ran off with my stepsister, now that they're struggling financially and asking for my help? Update 1. I had no idea what to do, and the comments here only confused me more. Some said I was right to reject them, while others said I'd always been the golden child, and that's why Melissa started acting out. So this wasn't as helpful as I thought it would be. I decided to talk to my parents, because whenever I've faced problems in my life, I've always gone to them for advice, and this time was no different. They told me that I had no reason to feel sorry for Melissa, because we had all done everything we could to try to make her a better person. But if she wasn't willing to change at some point in her life, there wasn't much we could do for her. My father told me he had every intention of letting her take over the business if she had behaved and been a good daughter, but she failed at everything and completely mocked our family. After that, it would be foolish to expect him to let her take control, or even be part of the family again. That made me feel a lot better because talking to my parents always helps. So I'll try not to feel guilty about things I no longer do. Update 2. It's been about a week since Melissa showed up at my door, and since her visit to my parents, we haven't heard from her again. I almost thought she had gone back to Greg, until today, when she showed up at my workplace to make a scene. It was horrible because she just walked into the building, stood in front of my office, and started shouting about how I had stolen the business right from under her nose by pretending to be a good girl in front of our parents and constantly flattering them to get their approval. Apparently, I was responsible for slandering her by falsely accusing her of harassing me throughout our childhood and even talking to my father to send her to rehab, just to solidify my position as the golden child of the family. She kept ranting that the business should have been hers, but now I was refusing to let her even be a part of it because I was jealous that Greg had chosen her over me. Unlike our parents, who always favored me, and since I wasn't used to being overlooked, I lost it and went off on her. When I heard the shouting, I decided to go out and see it for myself. After calling security, I tried to tell her to shut up, but she kept going for a good few minutes until they finally threw her out of the building. I decided to call my dad before I called the police to get his opinion, and he was furious. He told me to go straight ahead and call the police. Fortunately, when the police arrived, she was still lurking nearby, probably waiting for me to leave the building so she could yell at me or maybe do something worse, like physically attack me. The police took her away and charged her with trespassing and disturbing the peace. These are minor charges and she'll probably get off with a fine or maybe community service at worst, but it will certainly be on record and that's never good. I told my dad that she had been charged and arrested, and I expected him to be a bit upset about it. But he just seemed exasperated and said he was tired of dealing with her madness and needed a break from it. Honestly, I feel bad for him because it can't be easy having a daughter like Melissa and being blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even though most of the time it's her own fault. Honestly, we've all been really patient. Update 3. Well, I think Melissa has gone back to California because a couple of days have passed, and we haven't heard anything from her, which is strange because we expected her to attack us after her arrest. But my dad asked around, and people told him they saw her heading toward the bus station the other day, so I guess she's gone. Honestly, it's such a relief that she's gone now because I really feared she might try something explosive to get our attention again, and that's always bad news. I'm not sure what she'll do now with Greg's situation, because it seems unlikely she'll get help from anyone else after this. I just hope they both figure something out and get out of this mess. I'm not even being kind or compassionate right now. I have very selfish reasons for saying this because I know if they don't find a way out, they'll just come back here with Greg and bother us more. I don't want that. So honestly, I hope and pray that she or Greg find a job and can support themselves. Anyway, I haven't heard from her for a couple of weeks at least, and I'm relieved that this nightmare is finally over.